Welcome to meeting number 47 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, January 27, 2026. The committee will resume its study of labor force impacts of menopause and perimenopause. Today's meeting is taking place, as usual, in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of members and witnesses. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For those on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. I think that's already been done by our witnesses. I would like to remind witnesses that committee members may ask questions in French or English. If you will need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece and select the channel you would like to take full advantage of the time allotted for questions and answers. I think you've already done so. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair, but I don't want to break the flow, so I intervene not very often. So I will now welcome our witnesses. So I'm very glad to have with us Dr. Sylvie Demers, a family physician, and from the Menopause Society Nova Scotia, Dr. Shauna O'Hearn, who is the director. Welcome to everyone. We will begin with the opening remarks of Dr. Demers. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Madam Chair, first, I would like to thank the Standing Committee on the Status of Women for its invitation. I have been a family physician since 1998. I am also a biologist and hold a postdoctoral degree in experimental medicine. In January 2005, I founded a clinic specializing in hormone therapy for women, men, and transgender individuals. I am likely one of the Canadian physicians who has treated the largest number of women for issues related to premenopause, perimenopause, and menopause. For the past 25 years, I have been advocating for women's access to safe and effective hormone therapy, specifically a regimen consisting of transdermal 17B estradiol and progesterone, commonly known as bioidentical hormone therapy for women. I'm the author of 4 books, including hundreds of scientific articles, among them a bestseller, Hormones au féminin, Repensez votre santé. I have also analyzed in detail the links between female hormones and vitamin D, cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, and breast cancer. I served as a medical expert in the acclaimed documentary L'Auto-Menot. This documentary led to women in Quebec having benefited since May 2022 from unrestricted coverage for transdermal 17B estradiol gel, estrogel, and micronized oral progesterone. What struck me most about women in perimenopause and menopause is how their suffering is trivialized. Yet the signs and symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, largely due to a deficiency in estradiol and progesterone, affects all bodily systems and are not limited to hot flashes, which affect about 80% of women. Unlike hot flashes, which may diminish or even cease over time, many consequences of a deficiency in female hormones will all too often worsen. Joint and muscle problems, osteoporosis, atherosclerosis, myocardial infarction, heart palpitations, metabolic changes, genitourinary syndrome, sleep disorders, fatigue, anxiety and depression, and digestive disorders, to name just a few. For many women, the lack of treatment results in time off work due to exhaustion and or chronic pain. Financial insecurity then becomes the reality for many women. Hormone therapy for women is recognized as the most effective treatment. It can be bioidentical or non-bioidentical. Unfortunately, due to some confusion between these two types of hormone therapy on the part of the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada, the SOGC, access to hormone therapy remains very limited. First, the scientifically proven risks of hormone therapy are associated with oral or non-bioidentical estrogens, and especially with progestins, not with transdermal 17B estradiol and progesterone, so-called bioidentical hormone therapy. Furthermore, with some exceptions, the SOGC advises against prescribing hormone therapy for preventative purposes alone, thereby depriving many women of preventative medicine. Furthermore, the premenopausal period, when menstrual cycles are still regular, is not recognized. Yet this is a crucial period that can last more than a decade, during which women begin to be overdiagnosed, overmedicated, overtreated with psychiatric treatments, and placed on disability. Contrary to popular belief, menopause does not last just one day. The premenopause, perimenopause, menopause period covers approximately half of women's life expectancy. It is important to note that hormone therapy using transdermal 17B estradiol and progesterone is the only type of hormone therapy that can be titrated, allowing for the maximization of its many benefits and the minimization of its risks. My approach to treating women is increasingly recognized by many colleagues I have trained and is in high demand by women themselves. My experience shows that properly prescribing hormone therapy helps women stay in the workforce longer. Dr. Demers, unfortunately, the time is up. You'll certainly have the opportunity during the questions and answers to conclude your opening remarks.
Parole est à vous. Vous avez
Dr. O'Hearn, you have the floor.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak on this important topic today. I appear today at the intersection of health, education, and workplace leadership, and as the co-founder and director of the Menopause Society of Nova Scotia. Through that work, we've focused on raising awareness, leading the annual Atlantic Menopause Conference, and advocating with the Nova Scotia government to establish a Menopause Centre of Excellence. At Dalhousie University, we've advanced workplace leadership through support groups, conferences, staff training, and by partnering in the Menopause Starts Here initiative through the Menopause Foundation of Canada. Much of the discussion around menopause has appropriately focused on the medical lens and on treatment options, and that remains critical. At the same time, menopause is not experienced only as a clinical issue. It also has a biosocial and cultural dimensions that shape how people experience symptoms, seek support, and remain engaged at work. That is why a holistic approach is essential. We need all voices, all types of work, and all workers. Menopause does not affect only office-based professionals. It affects people in all sectors, including healthcare, education, trades, manufacturing, as well as shift workers, caregivers, part-time workers, and people in precarious employment. A truly inclusive response must reflect that diversity. Menopause is a natural life stage, but for many it brings symptoms that affect work. For some, the impact is minimal. For others, it affects attendance, performance, confidence, and career progression. Because menopause is surrounded by stigma and silence, many employees struggle privately rather than asking for support. Workplace solutions can be straightforward, effective, and low cost. Employers can offer flexibility for medical appointments, improve access to rest areas. They can train managers to respond respectfully and without embarrassment. They can review policies on sick leave, accommodations, and shift work so that menopause is part of workforce planning. When workplaces are menopause inclusive, people stay healthier, stay employed, and stay productive. Supportive workplaces reduce unnecessary strain and help retain skilled workers at a time when organizations are struggling to recruit and keep experienced staff. This is not only about compassion. It is also about workforce sustainability, equity, and sound organizational practice. We need inclusive menopause policy in language and practice, honoring trans, non-binary, and intersect experiences, and ensuring that Indigenous, Black, and racialized voices lead culturally safe solutions. I urge the committee to recommend a national research strategy on menopause. This is especially important given that Canadian research funding allocated to women's health remains only at 7%. We still have major evidence gaps on prevalence, workplace impact, accommodations, treatment access, and the experience of diverse populations. A federal strategy could help close those gaps and ensure menopause is studied as a medical, workforce, equity, and social policy issue. My call to action for Canada to move forward on 3 fronts: public education, workplace action, and research. We need a national framework for menopause-inclusive workplace and a coordinated research strategy that reflects the federal government's role in advancing education, advancing evidence, building knowledge, and supporting innovation. Together, these steps would ensure that menopause is addressed as a serious public issue affecting health, work, and economic participation. Canada has the expertise and the leadership to reduce stigma around menopause in the workplace. What we lack is the evidence. The federal government is uniquely positioned to lead, setting national standards, funding research, and equipping employers with tools and guidance. We need a holistic approach to menopause in the workplace. With action, we can retain experienced workers, advance equity, and build workplaces where people thrive from entry all the way through to retirement. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the discussion and questions.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you to both of you for your comments and for having shared your thoughts with us. We'll start questions with Leila Goodridge. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for joining us today. Dr. Demers, I'll start with you. So if you have someone who goes to your clinic who presents as being in perimenopause, what would be the first thing you would do with her? As a family doctor, you always need a complete medical history. You have to look at everything, all of the aspects, because whether it's premenopause or perimenopause or menopause, it affects the whole body. So a woman could have muscle pain, and it could be due to hormones or not, or it could be a combination of the two. So having a differential diagnostic is important. And when the diagnosis is perimenopause, I would treat her with bioidentical hormone therapy. It's as simple as that. So I understand that in Quebec, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy is free. Yes. Are there other provinces in Canada that have a similar policy? I'm not certain enough to answer. I think certain places, yes, but I'm not the best person to answer that question. Okay, I understand. I know there are often questions when people take hormone therapy, what would the impact be on breast cancer? Are there impacts? Does research show that there's an impact? That is the question. It's a very important question. What are the contraindications? As I said in my opening remarks, there are many contraindications for hormone therapy. That's one of the things I advocate for. There are so many consequences to not taking hormones. And I'm not fighting for women who don't want to take hormones. It's their choice. I really respect women's choice. I fight for women who want to take hormones and who are being refused a prescription. When I wrote my book about rethinking your health and female hormones, I was talking about breast cancer. After that, many women who'd had breast cancer came to me. They were not being prescribed hormones, and then I did prescribe them. And so I really fight to fight the myths about contraindications. It's been shown, this was with different hormone therapy than what we produce. Thank you very much.
Dr. O'Hearn, I guess, what does it look like for a patient in Nova Scotia if you were trying to prescribe something like a hormonal replacement therapy?
So I'm not a physician, so just want
Sorry.
to emphasize.
Apologies.
Yeah, but the conversations would be very similar to Dr. Demers' comments. You would have a discussion with your family physician and be able to find the best path for yourself. Yeah.
So then, what is the research showing when it comes to like interactions, and how do women go about getting support for perimenopause and menopause? This isn't something that's often talked about in society.
Mm-hmm. And so I think starting with the first point would be it's an area that we know is both understudied, under-researched, and not talked a lot about. Even I'm an occupational therapist, and I think Dr. Demers can speak to the experience in the family physician world. There is limited training for our healthcare providers on menopause, and we're doing a lot of studies on that now to understand what is being taught, where are the gaps, and how do we start to fill those gaps.
Et alors, Dr. Demers, je sais...
Dr. Demers, as a woman, I know there are very few family doctors who are women. I've never had a doctor who was a woman, just for example. So as a woman, do you think you have an opportunity to have a different perspective on this and to really promote the benefits of treatment for perimenopause and menopause? Well, in Quebec, I think there are a lot of women doctors. The new cohorts are majority women in Quebec. I teach a lot of women who are becoming doctors, family doctors, and it's pretty incredible what's happening now in Quebec, really. So I have to say that it's happening globally as well, not just in the United Kingdom, but last year we saw at the FDA, there were about 10 specialists on hormone therapy, experts in hormone therapy from different disciplines. Maybe surgeons, internal medicine, cardiology, gynecology, urology. They were they were saying it was more about medical dogma than evidence, because women were really scared through a poor interpretation of a study. It's the White study. It was an excellent study. The problem is not the study. It's that it was overinterpreted. It was really overinterpreted, poorly interpreted, with disastrous consequences for women. There was a regression for women. Thank you, Ms. Goodridge, for that exchange. You'll surely have the opportunity to talk about that study again with our next member, or another one. Ms. Tesser-Dirksen, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm a newish member to this committee, so I'm really pleased to be talking about this as a woman as well of a certain age. I remember when my mother went through menopause, and we were really mystified by the symptoms and the changes in her personality, and she was a professional nurse. So it was something that affected not only the family life at home, but also her work as well. And so I really appreciate having this discussion. So first question for Dr. O'Hearn, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the workplace. And I'm going to reference a statistic from the Menopause Foundation of Canada that found 67% of working women would not feel comfortable speaking to a supervisor about menopause symptoms, even though 32% say these symptoms have negatively affected their workplace performance. And we had a witness here last week that talked about what she experienced as an executive woman working in a corporate environment when she was going through menopause as well. And I think the question that arose for me was about workplace culture. And basically what's happening in the workplace, maybe not so much from a policy perspective, because a workplace may have all the policies in place, but what is the culture within the workplace that's informing how managers respond, how employees feel about going to their managers. So with that in mind, I'd like to hear a little bit about what your research and experience has shown with respect to workplace culture.
Thank you so
much. That's a really important question, and it really does get to some of the really critical points around the workplace. In my own research, the data is very similar as well, and so I looked across health professionals, and very similar. I would say one of the biggest pieces is around the training element. And if we're going to be creating menopause-inclusive workplaces, we need to provide the training for our managers. They are the front line. They are the ones that are taking all of the information. We need to make it easier for them. So looking at, as the example I used in my opening remarks at Dalhousie University, we are doing some of that training. And training shouldn't just be to our female employees. It needs to be to everyone, to our male employees, to our younger employees as well. We need to have allies within the workplace as well as those who are going through the journey. So training is critical. The other piece is providing those support networks. The evidence shows us how important support groups are within the workplace, so you don't feel alone. You feel that you are validated when you can share your experiences. I hear that over and over again from participants in our support group and ones that I've led nationally as well. Just to be able to share your experience has been critical. The third thing, and this may come up later as well, is around benefits. Many of our workplaces, and the evidence shows that 1 in 4 of our employees do not know what their benefits are. So if you don't know what your benefits are, how can you then access them? Those that know what their benefits are don't know, or know that they have benefits, don't know what it means from a menopause perspective. So back to the training, our managers really need to have training, not just on menopause, but what are the supports within our workplace so that we know where there are gaps and where our employees, where we need to advocate for some of those changes as well.
Thank you. And considering that some of those initiatives are going to be more kind of in the jurisdiction of a province, could you talk to us a little bit about your experience regionally across Canada? Have you seen patterns, province to province, region to region, urban versus rural? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, right now what I'm seeing is there is work happening at the provincial government level in which they're across many of the jurisdictions trying to understand what does this even mean, bringing it up, trying to remove the silence and the stigma attached to menopause in the workplace. And they are starting with the conversation, opening the door, making sure that there is a discussion taking place. I also think that many of the jurisdictions are recognizing that there's not one answer. This is going to take a multi-pronged approach, which takes time. And it's going to take a co-creation model with our employees. And opening that door, putting resources in place is really important. One last piece to that is with that leadership that takes place in the workplace, many of the people who are taking that role on are doing it as volunteers. Who are those volunteers? They typically are women. So it becomes invisible labor within the workforce. So not only do we need to bring the conversation forward, we need to acknowledge it and make sure that it's recognized and valued and that they are supported in that place. So it doesn't become an additional workload for employees and particularly female employees.
Thank you. And you also mentioned several times, and so did Dr. Demers, about the lack of information that we have that's informing policies and best practice. So it's really a question about data collection and how we're interpreting that data. So because data is really where we start and where we identify those problems, that's how we determine how it's going to affect people, right? So if you wouldn't mind commenting maybe on the state of the data collection from a national perspective, and either one of you can speak to that, whichever you choose. Would you like to answer that, Dr. Demers?
In fact, maybe it's a little strange what I'm going to say, but I think there is a lot of data. But it needs to be sought out. I'm sorry, Madame Demers, it's always when you're speaking. Don't take it personally. The time is up. Madame Larouche, 6 minutes for you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I wanted to ask other questions, but thank you, Madame Demers, Ms. O'Hearn. But Madame Demers, it's interesting it seems like there's a lack of data. That's what we hear sometimes. You say that's not the problem, that we do have the data, but it needs to be sought. Could you complete your answer? Where can we find that data? When I wrote my book, I didn't think there was a lot of data, but then I was surprised that there are a lot of researchers who are working in the shadows. I'm speaking from the point of view of a doctor. I'm not talking about a financial point of view. I'm talking about a medical point of view. It seems like there is a lot. That's why I wrote 4 books. There's hundreds of studies. So before reinventing the wheel, it's important to look at what researchers have found over decades. And there's quite a lot. We talk about that and we go further. I was surprised that there was quite a lot. But of course, I think one of the important points is to change the focus of premenopause, perimenopause, and menopause, because it affects all of the systems. So it's important to invest in the front line, family doctors, nurse practitioners, to invest in research, to see how things are going, because often it was done a little disparately, but when we're all together, I think it's a much different point of view. Okay, before I go to my next question, if I understand what you're saying, it's not a lack of data. It's trying to bring it all together. Well, it's always good to have more. That's clear. But I think there's already quite a bit from a medical point of view. Where's the weakness then? So we have it, but, well, my point of view, and it's my angle, I think there are 3 main reasons. The first thing is that medicine, the way we operate when we make recommendations, is it's very siloed. So women's health went to obstetricians, gynecologists, and that was justified because we thought that female hormones were only related to reproduction. So recommendations were mainly, not exclusively, but mainly from obstetricians, gynecologists. They're excellent. That's not the problem. They're essential. They need to be part of the discussion. But there's not the point of view of integrating the knowledge. The problem is integrating the knowledge. So we need to integrate it because there are many researchers who've studied female hormones, cardiologists, neurologists, psychiatrists, family doctors, urologists. So that's what's lacking, the integration of knowledge. And yes, there's room for more research to improve hormone therapy care, of course. But I think it needs to be at the front line because when you have a problem, whether it's premenopause, perimenopause, or menopause, who do you go see if you have a problem? If you have a problem with your shoulder, for example, you go see your family doctor. The family doctor won't know if it's hormonal. If you have osteoporosis, who do you go see? Your family doctor. If you're depressed, so the frontline medicine needs to have expertise because they're the ones who see women and they need to work with all of the professionals. And I've done it. We need fewer consultations with specialists. Specialists love that because they have pure problems, not 12 hormones, and they're not too sure. I could give you an example. There's a patient who is in premenopause. Often there are heart palpitations, and people don't know it's because of a lack of progesterone. We don't learn that. She goes to the cardiologist, not the gynecologist. The cardiologist does an extensive workup, and they're called benign palpitations. And that's how it goes for so many health problems that happen at premenopause when cycles are still regular. And the bulk of the problem is there, in my view, based on my experience. It jumped out at me because it's easy, it's simple. Okay, so if there's a recommendation there, it's integrating knowledge. Yes, integrating knowledge, not recreating the wheel. There's a lot of scientific evidence already, and research is always appropriate, of course. So I'm hearing a lot about the front line. Yes, that's necessary. Otherwise, we won't solve things. I have less than a minute left. When we talk about integrating, about demystifying things, in 30 seconds, you said you were part of a documentary in Quebec. My family doctor is a woman, but before I had a man, but he was very open to questions about female health. So we're at the forefront in Quebec with L'Automeno, the documentary. What did that change? Well, it's about knowing that female hormones are important for the whole body. Women are always taught to look at the shadow side, but there's such a bright side because hormones are important for all of the systems. And that's, women are complex. Thank you, Ms. Demers. Ms. Roberts,
Vous avez 5 minutes.
you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I guess I'm going to ask my first question to Dr. Demers. You spoke about the complete medical history. Is there any research done that, for example, if a female is on certain medication, how does that interact with the hormone medication? And does it act in a positive or negative way, or does that have to, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's certain medications where you can't have, for example, if you're on blood thinners, they say you shouldn't eat pineapple, or you shouldn't have other fruits that would counteract the medication. Is there any proof or research to that?
En fait, moi, je fonctionne un petit peu comme avec des cahiers d'observation.
In fact, I take observations and I was looking at what women were taking and how that affected their dose. And so I looked at what would interact, what about the efficiency, the effectiveness, what does it mean for the dose? I measure things. And yes, when I teach doctors and nurse practitioners and pharmacists, we learn how to prescribe with art and science with hormone therapy. We need to take into account what patients are taking. It's my obsession, if I may say that. It's to have the safest, most effective hormone therapy for women. So everything interacts. Our lifestyle habits interact, everything. The way we take the hormones, everything. So it's complex. It needs to be with doctors who are trained, but it's not that complicated. But yes, there are precautions to take. Like somebody who would take thyroid hormones or a type 1 diabetic, you have to take into account everything. And that's the role of family doctors, nurse practitioners, to have an overall view and to integrate the knowledge. We're complex. So yes.
I guess, do you think that male doctors or female doctors are better equipped to deal with this issue?
Ben, actuellement, c'est sûr que
Currently, our training is tainted by a patriarchal approach. Female hormones give trouble and cancer is what we learn. That's still how it is a little bit. It's always spoken about negatively. I'm trying to change things. There are always two sides to the story. Female hormones don't give cancer or feed cancer. They're good hormones. Everything's been mixed up. There's a lot of confusion and stereotypes, very sexist stereotypes. It's still very patriarchal. Testosterone, because I prescribe to men and to transgender people. So I see the biases that people have. It's so clear. It jumps out at you. So we need to change that perception that women are poorly designed, poor us. No. We have so many advantages to being women, but now we're talking about menopause when things aren't going well. It's because we're losing our good hormones. So we give them back with the right dose. And then women generally do well.
Changed, and I remember going to my doctor when I was in menopause, and we were told that once you're on those drugs, you have to stay on them for life. I understand that's changed now. So now that the period of staying on the hormone medication is 5 years, is that correct?
non, c'est tout des
Well, these are all myths, dogma. This is not scientific, the 5-10 years. Things have really changed. We see it that the National Institute of Excellence on Health and Social Services in Quebec produced a report in October 2024. There's no longer an age. It's a choice with women. The Institute didn't have a mandate to decide about the preventative side of hormone therapy. That's something maybe they will do in the future. But they looked at how to alleviate symptoms, and it was really limited to some aspects, but there's no longer an age to it. And the Institute, what's interesting is that, to be brief, there are two very positive points. They recognize that hormone therapy, which I've been advocating for 25 years, 17B estradiol and micronized, well, that's the first choice for treatment. In Toronto, in protocols for transgender women, it's been recognized. In 2019 it was, so we're getting there for women. Madame Demers will have to, well, you'll send us the information in writing if you wish. So, Ms. Nathan, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. And my first question would be to Dr. Demers. So we've heard testimony that menopause is not simply a health issue, and we've talked throughout about that. It's also a workplace issue, an economic security issue, a gender equality issue. Many women described spending years trying to understand symptoms that were affecting every aspect of their lives, including the ability to work. Now, some spoke about reducing hours, turning down opportunities, or leaving jobs altogether before receiving appropriate support because they are not able to identify what's going on with them. And from your clinical perspective, how are gaps in menopause diagnosis, treatment, and physicians' education affecting women's ability to remain in the workforce, and what healthcare reforms would have the greatest impact on improving both health outcomes and economic security for women?
En fait, c'est très simple.
Well, it's very simple. Find the cause and treat the cause. When we look at men who are treated for andropause, just to illustrate the gap, often men have a lower rate by 2 or 3, and then we treat them. There's no time limit. It can start at any age, and it could go their whole life. It's their decision. We'll provide the dose with bioidentical hormones. When it's women, well, it becomes very complicated. It's discussed. Is it relevant? But women, it's not that their hormone rates go down by 2 or 3 times. No, it's 20 times, okay? So it's much more serious with much bigger consequences than for men. And we can give them their own hormones, bioidentical hormones, with the right dose. It's very simple. It's just too simple, you understand? And I'm pleased because in 2025, a nice study from the United Kingdom, they have the same approach, well, very few differences, and I wasn't aware of a group of doctors, frontline physicians, who in the menopause review found similar rates to me, about the same conclusions. And we know that in science, well, validity is based on observations. It needs to be reproducible. And I've been providing training for a long time. I have hundreds of doctors and nurses I've trained, nurse practitioners. It's easy to see this. It's easy to treat. And transgender women, it's been simple to have recommendations. Transgender women receive estradiol 17 beta. We would never give another type of estrogen. And if you're under 40, here, this is the protocol that's currently in place in Toronto. They receive transdermal estradiol for those over the age of 40. Here, there's still a dispute. And if a woman has any cardiovascular risk factors under 40, it's transdermal. And the dose is adjusted for transgender men and women and for men, but when it's just women, it becomes very complicated.
And So you teach other physicians right now, and as a woman, you would have the perspectives to offer to them when you're teaching. So,
Beaucoup.
A lot, yes.
and I'm thinking like when normally when physicians go through schools, is this taught to all of them? A lot of men are physicians, like my doctor. Like I know some of my colleagues inquired about this. Is it taught at all, or is it just like a one-day lecture and they move on, or how do they manage to teach this?
Quand c'est arrivé l'étude Y,
When the Y study came out in July 2002, I remember everything. And I prescribed transdermal 17B, estradiol, and progesterone. I had been prescribing it for a year based on the evidence because a lot of researchers were finding that it wasn't the right type of hormone therapy for women that was being prescribed. It wasn't new. It was found to be safer. But when the study came out, everything stopped. Everything stopped overnight. Really. And then there was so much fear. It was like a loss of collective memory. What we knew, we no longer knew. That's what happened. And then we've re-begun. Thank you, Dr. Demers. You'll probably have the opportunity to say a little bit more about that study soon. Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
Pour 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Pardon, c'est pas...
I apologize. Madame Larouche, 2.5 minutes. How could I forget you?
ça va, Madame la Présidente?
That's okay, Madam Chair. Thanks once again to the witnesses for joining us today. My first question, you were talking about a study in the United Kingdom and another study. Are there other studies elsewhere, other things we should be looking at that could inspire us here? On bioidentical hormone therapy, there's a lot. I'm a pioneer in the dosing of estradiol and progesterone. I've done that since 2005. I've been my own professor. There was nothing. You know, it said that I was told that setting the dose didn't amount to anything. I looked at the literature. There's nothing on it. But there's a lot of small studies in cardiology when women had such a dose in perimenopause. Well, they talked about having a lack of estrogen, and there were little studies on how this affected depression and other things like osteoporosis. We have a lot on how it's protective. So when we put it all together, and now a lot of doctors around the world set the dose, and there was a big study in the United Kingdom that arrived at the same conclusions as me. Great. So we've talked a lot about health. I have about a minute left. So the question will be for both of you, because both of you talked about the consequences at work, the economic consequences. So I'd like to talk about that. Maybe in 30 seconds each, what could we suggest as measures? Should we have something specific for EI so women have support, workplace education? What do we need to do to minimize the economic impacts? Ms. O'Hearn, please.
Important question. I would say definitely workplace education is critical as a starting point, and the evidence
Excusez-moi,
shows.
madame, il y a pas...
There's no interpretation.
It's okay?
Allez-y, madame.
Go ahead.
Workplace education is critical, and those the support groups that I talked about within the workplace. 2 places to look at research as well for the labor force impact on menopause, where really great work has been happening, is in Australia and in the UK, and I will send some of those studies for you. They are quite advanced in thinking about and advancing the conversation around menopause in the workplace through legislation as well as through a specific programming.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Ward. Madame...
Thank you very much. Ms. Roberts, now it's really your turn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know there's a lot of symptoms with menopause. Hot flashes, night sweats, cold flashes, insomnia. One of the things as well is brain fog and weight gain and joint muscle pain, thinning of the hair. Would this hormone treatment help prevent some of those ailments?
Oui. Alors, en fait,
Yes, in fact, hormone therapy, the way I advocate for it, it's not a magic solution. There are still symptoms, and I'm thinking of other factors, but for the majority, for many women, it will prevent many problems. You were talking about muscle pain, joint pain, and now it's official. There's a syndrome, a musculoskeletal perimenopause menopause syndrome. It's been studied. It happens before menopause. We're talking about perimenopause, but we should also talk about premenopause. I see it when women still have regular cycles. So there's tendinitis in the shoulder, typically. So there are preventative aspects. It's not perfect. There are still changes that will remain. But if we recognize and work with, based on our observations, seems to be the best type of hormone therapy for women, well, with the dose, we can improve things. But there are preventative aspects for women who start early. The earlier you start, the more it's preventive.
If a woman has to have a hysterectomy because of endometriosis and other issues, would that trigger early menopause?
Ça fait l'objet des débats parmi
That's been a topic of debate with obstetricians and gynecologists for years, and now they say yes, it tends to advance menopause by a few years. But once again, it's on a case-by-case basis. It depends if you smoke, for example. But yes, there's less vascularization in the ovaries when the uterus is taken out. But once again, it's on a case-by-case basis.
Muscle pains, and I kind of laugh about this because I was an athlete my whole life, played in sports, in joint men and women's sports because I was a little aggressive with my sports. And my son said to me the other days, well, you know, women aren't as strong as men. And as you get older, you just don't have the same strength. Well, believe it or not, I proved him wrong. I got him to get the glove. We went out, we played baseball, came in with a red hand. Wow. So I didn't lose that muscle. Did I slow down? Yes. Did I lose the strength? Not as much. Was it a little weaker? Probably. If those hormone medications were offered to me, would it have helped?
Oui, c'est sûr que l'hygiène.
Yes, lifestyle habits are important. The basis of preventative medicine is to have good life habits. Hormones aren't magic. We had our hormones before, and we could still have health problems and be tired. So lifestyle habits are still important our whole life. But yes, it's in the quality. Well, estrogen and progesterone, we're not talking about testosterone here, but they play a role in all of the muscular, skeletal systems, the bone, the joints, the tendons, all over. So yes, it's important everywhere.
So is it important as well that doctors understand whether it's a male or female doctor, the importance of the drug to insist? Because sometimes I hear comments like, oh, she's going through menopause, oh, she's moody because of menopause. I don't necessarily believe that that is the case. I think there's other aspects in life to cause those feelings. But do we need to educate more doctors, especially family doctors, to understand the benefits of the medication? Because I've never heard the positive side of it. I'll be quite honest. This is good news for me to hear. Would it be more beneficial to educate the doctors when they're going through medical school?
Ben, je vous dirais qu'au Québec, c'est en train de se faire. De plus en plus.
I would say it's being done in Quebec. There are more and more doctors who are being trained. I train doctors every month. There's a real movement. And these doctors and nurse practitioners also provide training. So there's momentum, and I'd say there's a revolution underway in Quebec. So, and probably in the United Kingdom, it's happening now. So it's not for nothing that you're conducting a study. There's a lack of satisfaction from women that they're expressing that they didn't express before. Thank you, Ms. Demers, Ms. Menard. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Dr. Demers, Ms. O'Hearn, we are hanging on your every word. We're very interested. I'll start with you, Ms. O'Hearn. I think we need to draw a picture that's a little darker of women's professional advancement in different workplaces in their 20s when they finish school. There are employers who are reluctant for some positions because they think they'll leave soon to start a family, for those who want to start a family. In the 30s and 40s, well, then they might be absent more than others because they might have family demands. And then in the 40s and 50s, oh, well, there's menopause. How will they progress in their careers? I think there are sexist biases in our workplaces still today in 2026. You talked a lot in your recommendations about raising awareness in workplaces. Could you give examples? We don't want it to just be theoretical. Could you give us examples of best practices? What could work? Because when we talk about perimenopause, menopause, either it's trivialized or it's ridiculed. I'll spare you jokes that have been told. I don't like that approach. What could you recommend to us today?
Thank you for the question, and it's a really important, an important one. And you are correct. Gendered ageism is still alive in our workplaces and something that kind of circles around the conversation of menopause. I also want us to be really careful that this doesn't become an individual conversation, that this is really about the workplace, and it's really wonderful that this committee is looking at the impact on the workplace, right? So that it isn't just left in the hands of an individual to navigate this. And so specific examples of work that has happened, I've mentioned the support group. So having a leader that brings together individuals who want to have those conversations, and they may be allies. They also could be the members of our teams who are going through menopause. And the topics may be all the topics we're talking about here today around understanding lifestyle strategies, understanding who is your healthcare team. We've talked today a lot about physicians and nurse practitioners, but we also have physiotherapists, occupational therapists, dietitians, nutritionists, mental health practitioners, so that our teams, our staff actually understand who they can be reaching out to. And I mentioned earlier what their benefits are, what's covered, what's not, so that we're not creating a two-tiered system. So if I can afford to buy or pay for service A and somebody else can't, that's not fair either. So I think those are important pieces within our workplace. It is also really important for us to see who's missing from our conversations. I mentioned earlier, we often have the conversation around office-based professionals, but we're not looking at all of those individuals who might be in precarious work environments, who don't have benefits, who don't have supports, who are in small business owners. How are we as a country supporting all of the workers out there? So I'm giving you sort of more abstract, less specifics here, but just to say we end up, because the evidence focuses on those who are in very formal work structures, we forget about those on the outskirts of those.
Merci beaucoup, c'est éclairant. Madame...
Thank you very much. That's informative. Dr. Demers, a few minutes ago, you said that you advocate for safe hormone therapy. I want to check with you. Does that imply that there is ineffective or unsafe hormone therapy now in the country? Could you specify? Yes, we know that if you take oral or non-bioidentical estrogen, it will increase the risk of blood clots. So there are risks, and a lot of people are at risk of blood clots. There can be pulmonary embolisms and strokes and more. So it's important, and it needs to be estradiol, it needs to be bioidentical, and it needs to be transdermal to avoid the risk of blood clots. When we talk about progesterone and progestins, it's a whole world. Progestins are responsible for the vast majority of the demonstrated risks of hormone therapy. So it's extremely important to give progesterone, and that can be explained at the molecular level. So it needs to be safe hormone therapy. And it's not a coincidence that our own hormones are the safest. They're identical at the chemical level. A few seconds left. No, my time is up. Okay.
Cruel, vous dites?
It's cruel, you say? All right. Ms. O'Hearn, Ms. Demers, thank you very much. It was so interesting. We could have spent the rest of the afternoon with you. It's very frustrating to me. I have many questions and I can't ask them. So we'll stay in place. We'll have our second panel come in. Thank you to both of you. I'll suspend for a few moments.
Alors, avant...
So we are back for our second hour together. Before we begin, I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of members and witnesses. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For those on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. I would like to remind witnesses that committee members may ask questions in French or English. If you will need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece so you can adjust your earpiece now. And a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair, but I don't like to break the flow, so I don't interrupt much, only to end someone's time. I would like to now welcome our witnesses.
Network of Canada, Evelyn Angens, j'espère que je prononce bien.
I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. The Director, Indigenous Initiatives. From the Federation of Doctors of Quebec, Dr. Anne-Patricia Prévost. And for the Quebec Network of Action Network for Women's Health, we have Élise Bruneau, Director. I think Madame Bruneau is having technical issues. So we'll begin with the other witnesses before we move to Ms. Bruneau.
With opening statements, Mrs. Angens, the floor is yours for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for inviting Dawn Canada to contribute to this important study. My name is Evelyn Hutchins, Director of Indigenous Initiatives at Dawn Canada. I also serve in a cross-employment position with Indigenous Disability Canada. I am pleased to speak today through the lens of disability justice, Indigenous inclusion, accessibility, gender equity, and human rights. Menopause and perimenopause are often viewed as private health matters. However, the evidence increasingly shows that they are labor force issues, workplace accessibility issues, health equity issues, and human rights issues. Across Canada, women, Indigenous women, deaf women, racialized women, women with disabilities, Two-Spirit people, and gender-diverse individuals tell us that menopause remains highly stigmatized, poorly understood, and inadequately supported in workplaces, healthcare systems, and public policy. Symptoms such as fatigue, sleep disruption, anxiety, chronic pain, sensory sensitivities, cognitive changes, memory difficulties, and challenges with concentration can significantly affect workforce participation and day-to-day functioning. While menopause is a natural life transition, its impacts can be functionally disabling. Many symptoms fluctuate over time and closely resemble the barriers associated with episodic and invisible disabilities. Yet menopause is rarely recognized within disability accommodation frameworks or workplace accessibility policies. This represents a significant policy gap. According to Statistics Canada, approximately 30% of women in Canada live with a disability. Many are already managing chronic illness, pain, fatigue, mobility limitations, sensory sensitivities, caregiving responsibilities, and systemic barriers before menopause symptoms begin. Emerging Canadian research is demonstrating that menopause can exacerbate existing disabilities and chronic health conditions. Research led by the Spinal Cord Injury BC found that women aging with spinal cord injuries often experience menopause in ways that intensify existing health challenges, including pain, fatigue, cognitive impacts, cardiovascular risks, bone loss, and bladder dysfunction. Importantly, participants reported that menopause symptoms were frequently misunderstood, dismissed, or attributed solely to their disability. As a result, many struggle to access appropriate care, workplace accommodations, and support. Despite a growing population of Canadians aging with disabilities, menopause and disability remain significantly under-researched and under-prioritized within health policy, workplace planning, and research funding. The labor force implications are substantial. Research from Menopause Foundation of Canada estimates that menopause costs the Canadian economy approximately $3.5 billion annually and contributes to roughly 540,000 lost workdays each year. 1/3 of working women report that menopause negatively affects their work performance. Nearly half report feeling too embarrassed to request support or accommodations. 2/3 say they would not feel comfortable discussing menopause with their supervisor. Importantly, menopause often occurs during what should be peak earning, leadership, and advancement years of a person's careers. Many individuals experiencing menopause are simultaneously balancing significant workplace responsibilities and caregiving responsibilities at home. When workplaces fail to provide, Canada risks losing experienced workers, leaders, mentors, and institutional knowledge. These findings reveal a broader cultural silence surrounding menopause. As menopause expert Dr. Jen Gunter has argued, the normalization of suffering and long-standing gender bias in medicine have contributed to menopause being under-researched, under-recognized, and inadequately addressed despite its significant impact on quality of life and workforce participation. Research also suggests that workplace culture itself can be a barrier. Many workplaces continue to operate.
Merci beaucoup, chère madame.
Thank you very much. 5 minutes go by very quickly. Thank you very much. Now, from the Réseau québécois d'action pour la santé des femmes, we have Élise Bruno, Director. I think the tech issue has been resolved, so you have 5 minutes, please. You are on mute. You're on mute.
Voilà, j'attendais qu'on m'autorise de mettre...
Okay. Can everyone hear me well? I can go ahead. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking today to address a topic that is still too often avoided here, as in most workplaces across Canada, perimenopause and menopause. Let me be blunt. Menopause is not a disease. It is not a weakness. Millions of women and gender-diverse people experience menstruation, perimenopause, and menopause, which are normal stages of their lives, and our collective tendency to ignore this in the workplace speaks volumes about the values that still shape our professional world. So the first thing to say is that this is a systemic problem, not an individual one. For decades, research in management and occupational psychology has largely ignored the physical realities of women's lives. Sleep, fatigue, and chronic stress are recognized as factors that influence work performance. But the bodies of women who menstruate, who are going through perimenopause, and who are experiencing menopause have been absent from these analyses. This reflects a world of work historically built around a norm of continuous availability that corresponds more closely to the male experience as it has traditionally been defined, in any case. When performance is measured against this standard, women fall short. It is not women's bodies that are the problem, it is the norm. The Quebec Network for Women's Health Action rightly reminds us that these realities, menstruation, pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause, are systematically treated as individual obstacles when in fact they are collective issues related to working conditions. And as long as we do not change this perspective, we will continue to lose competent and experienced women. The next point is that silence comes at a high cost. First and foremost, in dignity. Of the 2 million Canadian women workers aged 45 to 55, the vast majority are going through perimenopause or menopause. Many experience it in silence and shame. According to data from the Canadian Menopause Foundation, 2 out of 3 women do not dare to discuss it with their supervisor. Half feel embarrassed to ask for accommodations. Why this silence? Because our culture still associates menopause with ageism and devaluation, because women fear being perceived as fragile or less competent if they acknowledge their reality, because the model of the ideal worker, always available, always high-performing, bodiless, still applies relentlessly to women aspiring to leadership positions. This silence has real consequences: shame, presenteeism, gradual disengagement, and premature departures. But above all, it represents a daily affront to the dignity of millions of women. What we need is prevention, active listening, and accommodations. The approach I'm advocating for with my association is one we've championed for decades: a holistic, feminist, and intersectional approach to health. In practical terms, this means three things. First, do not pathologize. Perimenopause and menopause are not illnesses to be treated. They are normal biological processes experienced in very different ways, depending on the individuals involved, their life circumstances, and their working conditions. We must first recognize them as such, normal and legitimate, before seeking to manage them. Second, listen to women. They know what they need. Ultimately, they aren't asking for much: the ability to describe what they're going through without judgment. They ask for flexibility and the opportunity to work in a physically adapted environment. What surveys clearly reveal is that more than 9 out of 10 women support accommodations, and that employers who provide them build team loyalty and strengthen their organizational culture. Third, take structural action. It is not up to women to adapt in silence. Workplaces must adapt to the reality of half the population. Simple measures exist: prevention and awareness initiatives for all employees, flexible work policies, access to rest areas, training for managers in active listening and non-stigmatizing communication, free access to menstrual products, which are very helpful during perimenopause, health leave, and adequate group insurance coverage. The key consideration must always be to ensure that the measures adopted do not create a new layer of the glass ceiling or new barriers to hiring. Now, as Canada's largest employer, the federal government has a unique responsibility and opportunity. It can officially recognize perimenopause and menopause as occupational health realities, on par with other health issues recognized in the Canada Labour Code. It can train federal public service managers in an empathetic, non-stigmatizing approach to create safe environments where women can speak openly about their experiences without fear. It can shift the responsibility from the individual to the organization by making menstrual and hormonal inclusion an employer's responsibility, not a personal burden for every woman. And it can invest in prevention and research, particularly regarding working conditions that exacerbate or alleviate menopause-related symptoms. Changing the workplace norm to include the bodily realities of women and gender-diverse individuals affected by their body's natural cycles is not asking for privilege. It is demanding true equality, not formal equality, which treats everyone the same way. Real equality, which recognizes that women have bodies and realities, and that these realities deserve to be taken into account without shame, without taboo, and without having to choose between their health and their careers. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madame Bruno. Everything seems to be working well on your side. Now we have Dr. Prévost. You have the floor for 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Hello, I'm pleased to be with you. I am Anne-Patricia Prévost. I'm a family physician. I am a member of the board of directors of the Federation of General Practitioners of Quebec, and I teach at the University of Sherbrooke. I am here today to offer a perspective rooted in the clinical reality of the women we care for as family doctors. So, as Ms. Bruno mentioned, perimenopause and menopause are not diseases. They are normal phases in a woman's life. Just like other physiological life transitions such as pregnancy or aging, some women experience symptoms severe enough to affect their functioning, including at work. And as family physicians, we must avoid two pitfalls: trivializing symptoms when they become disabling, or conversely, systematically medicalizing a normal life transition. Those are our challenges. So, on the ground, in practice, experiences vary widely. Some women go through this phase with little impact, while others experience symptoms that disrupt sleep, cognition, mood, or functional ability. So it's very varied. Women who seek medical care often do so for symptoms such as sleep disturbances, brain fog, mood swings, joint pain, night sweats, and hot flashes. It is our duty to accurately assess the impact of these symptoms and to investigate their possible causes. As there are a variety of causes, there's different diagnoses for those symptoms. And we need to promote healthy life habits and to provide enough relevant care. I'm thinking of a patient who thought she was experiencing burnout. She had significant sleep disturbances related to perimenopause. But I also had a patient who had night sweats and brain fog, and she thought it was related to menopause, but she actually had sleep apnea. So it's very important to have a global view to differentiate the different pathologies linked to symptoms. what we see is there's a variability in clinical knowledge. There's a lot of underdiagnosis, but also overdiagnosis and failure to recognize symptoms. There's confusion in the media, myths and misconceptions that are common. We must also be wary of misinformation, the excessive commercialization of certain approaches, and the proliferation of tests or treatments with no proven benefit. Conversely, we must also ensure that women with significant symptoms do not lack access to effective treatments when they are indicated. So, symptoms associated with perimenopause and menopause can interfere with daily functioning. So, it's very real. These impacts are often invisible, trivialized, or unrecognized. There are small or major adjustments and improved access to healthcare that can have a positive effect on job retention. And it's our role to support their functional capacity, including their participation in the workforce when this transition becomes difficult. I would be cautious about the message we send if we imply that women in perimenopause or menopause are less capable of working or less productive. Most continue their professional lives successfully. The challenge is rather to ensure that those experiencing significant symptoms do not find themselves without support, without treatment, or misunderstood. I have a concrete plan to propose. So there are 3 aspects to better inform, better support, and better care. So first, we should improve education for the public, employers, and managers to normalize the conversation without stigmatizing it. And then we should promote simple, flexible, and low-cost accommodations in the workplace. And then we should improve training for professionals and ensure rapid access to relevant, high-quality care based on evidence. Thank you very much for listening. And if I could leave you with just one idea today, it would be this: normalize without trivializing and support without over-medicalizing. There are women who successfully navigate this transition, and those experiencing significant symptoms should never be invisible, misunderstood, or left without support. Thank you.
Eh bien, voilà, c'est dit, chère.
Thank you, Madame Prévost. We will begin our questions and answers. We'll have Ms. Cody for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I want to thank the witnesses for coming today and talking about a topic that impacts women in the workplace and even in their retirement, when loss of work could decrease their financial contributions. So it's really good that we're having this conversation. I'd like to direct my first questions to Dr. Prévost. Some women prefer using natural health products, which can be costly compared to pharmaceuticals. What do you say to women who prefer natural health products but are stuck in a system where health choice becomes a financial burden?
Tout d'abord, je pense que les femmes qui...
First, I think women who have symptoms need to go see a doctor to really have a medical diagnosis on the origin of the symptoms and to rule out other possible causes before using products when they don't even know the cause.
Okay, but naturopaths or natural health practitioners often aren't covered under benefit plans. What are you hearing from women who prefer natural health practitioners and naturopaths about how that affects their ability to seek the medical care? And where do you see an opportunity for change?
Je reste sur mon opinion.
I have the view, again, to see a frontline physician or another frontline professional who has medical skills to determine the problem. I think that going right away to natural health products without necessarily having enough information about the risks and the benefits, the expected effects, well, a healthcare professional must be consulted.
Women often need to request a specialist and wait months, if not years, to get treatment for common health issues. Why do you believe family doctors are not trained to fully recognize key signs of menopause?
Moi, je pense que les médecins professionnels...
I think the family doctors I train and others who come to our training sessions have enough training on menopause. We use the evidence that's available to us. We teach about menopause. I teach the course on menopause. in my teaching unit, so we have enough training. Maybe you'll say that that wouldn't be for all doctors, and they don't all keep up to date on menopause. There are doctors who specialize more in other areas like musculoskeletal or mental health or women's health, but there are clear objectives from the College of Physicians.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to Ms. Bruno. Do you feel that we have enough trained physicians to treat and care for all the women in this country who are experiencing menopause? And does this create a backlog, ultimately leading to misdiagnosis or delayed treatment?
Yes, I would tend to say that regarding the training of healthcare professionals, whether it's for menstruation or menopause, there can be historical biases, yes, regarding how women's bodies were perceived, and what I said earlier, where there's the thought that there would be something inferior. But we need to change the paradigm and accompany women. And we can see today that we're on the right path, but it takes time to correct those biases and to listen openly without stigmatization and to search for solutions and root causes. So all of this needs to be integrated in professional training for healthcare professionals to break out of that medicalization that is just the only lens. And as Dr. Prévost said, we can raise awareness with recommendations about healthy living. So it's a practice that needs to be enriched, whether it's for menstruation or menopause, because these are two natural phenomena that are intimately linked.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering, do you have any numbers or stats of women who are being misdiagnosed and treated for the wrong condition when going through menopause, and what that cumulative cost could be? And if not, why not?
So no, we've never had a funded project that would allow us to conduct surveys, but people reach out to us, the public and community groups and businesses, to raise awareness about menopause, to provide guidance. It's about common sense, to listen and dialogue and to break down taboos. But what we hear on the ground, and we conduct research, but we also report what we hear on the ground. The vast majority of women, and this is supported by official surveys by the Menopause Foundation, there's a lack of people listening, talking openly about what's experienced without fear of it being minimized, or the impact is considerable on a woman's professional and personal life. It's very deep. There's a shame it's very moving to hear it. There's a point of vulnerability. And for us, it's always very moving. It's part of our life as women. We should be able to talk about this. Thank you very much, Ms. Bruno. The floor now goes to Ms. Williams for 6 minutes.
I'm going to start my questions with Ms. Hutchins. Thank you so much for being with us today. I wanted to dig in a little bit. I'm curious if we have good data on the intersections of disability and menopause, if that is an area of research that we should be thinking about, and if you could offer any perspectives on that.
Thank you for the question. There is a lack of research when it comes to looking at the intersection of disability and menopause. And when we look at, in particular, if you look at Indigenous women, Two-Spirit individuals, and a lot of First Nation communities don't have the data to really look at holistic care and take a look at some of the barriers that are faced when accessing health care. So we know we've got the data that says that, yes, it's a social detriment of health, and how do we overcome that? And often when communities are facing capacity with just the primary health care needs, and when we have things like locums, and we have travel nurses, and we don't have relationships with healthcare workers, when you're transitioning into perimenopause and menopause, often that is something that is going to get left out because you don't have that relationship with your doctor. There's no understanding. Again, it's that silence, invisible suffering that is taking place.
Could you speak a little bit to any cultural practices or accommodations or ways of knowing and understanding what menopause looks like in Indigenous communities? And obviously there are many versions of that, but if there's something that you'd like to share with us, that would be helpful.
Well, I think the big thing with Indigenous communities is around a holistic approach. So it's the emotional, the mental, the physical, and the spiritual well-being, right? So it may not just be physical symptoms, it may not just be emotional well-being, but looking at all of that together and having supports in the community to be able to recognize and provide care.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchins. I'm going to ask Dr. Prévost a question. You spoke a little bit about social media and all of the information that's out there. I'm of a certain age, and so my Instagram feed is all filled with perimenopause, and so it feels like there are some of us who are having approaches and therapies and suggestions on what we should be doing. How do we think about ensuring that Canadian women have access to high quality, good information, especially when the noise and the disinformation is out there? What can we be doing there to support that?
En fait, comme vous dites, c'est vraiment un gros.
As you say, it's a major problem. The myths, misinformation, and it affects us. Weight gain, extra cortisol, perimenopause symptoms. Everyone wants us to buy natural products. And to follow up on the question, currently, there's no evidence that's enough to confirm the effectiveness of natural products, aside from a few positive elements of data on soy. So we have to look at the structure. How do we provide guidance? Sometimes someone says they're a doctor and they're not. So it's very dangerous. A woman who is experiencing symptoms is in a position of vulnerability. She tends to turn towards these people. So we need to have accessible care to meet women's needs.
Models of sort of peer support groups that are working well in terms of sharing good information?
J'ai pas notion, mais probablement.
I don't, but it must exist. There might be forums related to perimenopause and menopause.
Thank you very much. My last set of questions are for Madame Benoit. I wanted to talk a little bit more about your kind of feminist approach to this question. If there are best practices that you can speak of, are there feminist organizations who are doing this work really well from an HR perspective that we should be thinking about as good lessons and insights?
Pas à ma connaissance.
Not to my knowledge, no. I'm not saying it's not the case, but not to our knowledge. And I think we can see that there's an attraction to content we provide about menstruation and menopause in the workplace. And there's new focus by us since this year. We put this in place because we had a lot of requests how to talk about this in the workplace. So we are doing our work with the resources we have. I won't surprise you by saying there aren't 20 of us at our network. So we're trying to meet the demand. So not to my knowledge, but the need is there, of course. We are asked often at our network.
Question: if any of the witnesses, any of the three witnesses, have a kind of universal policy approach or one prescription for us to think about as a recommendation to
Je suis
take
désolée,
forward.
chers collègues.
I'm sorry, dear colleagues, I know.
With us as a written
Madame
submission.
Larouche, pour 6 minutes.
Ms. Larouche, 6 minutes, please. Thank you very much. Thank you to the witnesses for joining us. Thank you to the three of you. It's much appreciated because as I was preparing, I said at the outset, the first meeting on this study, this is much broader than just women's menopause in terms of health, because there are issues related to women's health. There's menstruation, pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. We see that at every life stage, women have certain realities. And even at the health committee, when we studied women's health, there were many aspects, and we were trying to demystify things. Is there a lack of research, a lack of evidence, a lack of knowledge? Why do we always have the impression that women's health, that it's more difficult to find solutions and to study it scientifically? That's what we hear. Economically, it's not discussed. There are prejudices. For a teenager missing school and it's stigmatized, or a woman in her 20s who's looking for a job and she's asked, do you intend to have children? Or a woman in her 30s or 40s, there are prejudices that she'll be overwhelmed by her family life. And then there are consequences of perimenopause and menopause when she's seeking a job in her 40s and 50s. But you've said it, at the professional level, it's often a professional peak at those ages when a woman has all of her knowledge and she could obtain a better salary to prepare for retirement. So it's very broad. There's the health aspect and the economic aspect of this study. And we also need to look at what falls under health care administration in Quebec. Well, there's Quebec with its doctor's offices, and on the federal side, it's medications. And so we have to unbundle all of that. If I start with healthcare, we've heard that there are studies on perimenopause and menopause, but that the problem is the integration of that knowledge into medicine. Would you confirm what was said at a previous panel? It could be Ms. Bruno, who is nodding. Maybe she can start.
Oui, je dirais.
Yes, I would say that I'd pick up on what you're saying about the lack of research. That's clear. We lack a considerable amount of research on women's health. And then to make the connection, what do we do with that data? How do we undertake something as big as workplace policies? It's a general vision of work. And women haven't been included in the world of work in the same way as men, not in a big way. And their bodies have been forgotten. I don't want to forget men. We're a feminist network, but men can empathize too. But women's bodies have been forgotten. And I think that resonates in each one of us when we talk about pregnancy, menstruation, menopause, and all of the difficulties related to menstruation. It's forgotten. And women hesitate to bring it forward because they're scared of the repercussions. That's what I'd like to say. I don't know if I'm exactly answering your question, but it's difficult to articulate all of this. Do we want to? Do we not want to? What will be the response? There's a lack of studies. It's generalized, and that's why it's important to talk about it today. There's a lot we still need to do to make progress on this, and women need to be able to speak about this issue. Ms. Prévost, would you like to add your view? Are there best practices internationally regarding research that could inspire us for health? Yes, there's research, and things have changed in all areas, not just for menopause, for cardiovascular, for diabetes, and more. And there are also, Dr. Demers was talking about a study in 2002, and then it was for 5 years, and then it was the lowest dose, and so now we have other data based on age or the length of menopause. So we need to continue conducting research, of course, and then research will evolve, it will change medicine. And sometimes we change our practices, but we do it for a number of other topics where we hadn't conducted research. So it doesn't just apply for menopause.
Madame Ungen, par rapport justement à ce stigma par rapport à la santé féminine et la difficulté après ça de...
So when we have studies, we need to integrate it on the ground in doctors' offices.
Qu'est-ce qu'on pourrait améliorer? Qu'est-ce qui pourrait être...
For Ms. Hudgens, what could be done? What could improve the integration of the data we have, or regarding the lack of data?
Sorry, my mic's not working.
15 secondes, Madame. Est-ce que ça va?
Is it working? Can you hear?
The question?
I didn't hear the question.
Okay. 20 secondes au total.
20 seconds, please. From your point of view on this question, is it a lack of data or a problem of integrating data and best practices in doctors' offices? What is the main problem?
I think the main problem, if we're looking at it from a lens of Indigenous women that experience perimenopause and menopause, it's often a lack of trust within the healthcare systems that really drive the access to healthcare is a social detriment of health. And when we look at...
I'm sorry. I have to interrupt you. Madame Roberts,
Ms. Roberts, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. My first question is to Dr. Prevost. Is there any studies that have been conducted on the adverse consequences of medication interaction with other medication in a woman is taking?
En fait, il y a des contre-indications.
In fact, there are counterindications to treatment. For example, if you've had cancer before, things like that. As with your last question, interactions with other medications, we see that especially with natural health products because often we don't know what the additives are to those natural health products. Otherwise, other than hormone therapy, because there are other things than hormone therapy to treat symptoms related to menopause. So yes, there are counterindications for the use of certain medications. So these are things that are documented in the guidelines.
Hormone therapy improves the quality of life for many women. A documentary report in Quebec helped make bioidentical hormones accessible to anyone who wants them. What is the current situation in the rest of Canada? Dr. Prevost, do you know?
Pouvez-vous répéter?
Could you repeat the question? I apologize.
Hormone therapy improves the quality of life for many women. We've heard that from the previous panel as well. A documentary report in Quebec helped make bioidentical hormone accessible to anyone who wants it. What is the current situation in the rest of Canada? Is that applied across all provinces or just in Quebec?
Ça, je pourrais pas vous dire.
I couldn't answer. I know that in Quebec, I know what's happening in Quebec, but I can't tell you for the rest of Canada. I apologize.
Okay. So, as a frontline family physician, are you seeing an increase in women seeking care for menopausal-related symptoms? Are there sufficient healthcare resources available to meet the demand?
Je vois une augmentation de la...
I see an increase in women going to their healthcare professionals for menopause symptoms. Yes, we do see that on the ground. People are asking questions, and they come see us. Is access adequate? Well, there's a shortage of family doctors. We're really trying to provide access for women's health. There are women's health clinics, and we're accessible at our clinics so it's possible for women to have an appointment for their symptoms.
We hear a lot of especially in our province, in my riding of Ontario and King Vaughan, we hear a lot of the fact that people are on a wait list for family physicians. And we have a shortage of family physicians. As a matter of fact, York University is building a school specifically for family physicians next to the Cordalucci Hospital. What advice would you give this government to include or advance or assist with the practice? A lot of our young students have to go abroad because there's no room here in Canada for them to take that course. What advice would you provide this government to ensure we have enough family doctors for the population of 40 million people plus? Anybody like to take a stab at that? She's frozen? Oh, I'm sorry.
Excusez-moi.
Unfreeze.
Est-ce que votre inquiétude, c'est...
Is your concern that doctors aren't trained as well in menopause?
But do we have a lack of family physicians, is my question. Because
Oui, we have a lack.
Oui?
Oui, on a un manque de...
Yes, we have a lack of family doctors, of course.
Okay, and if I could ask Evelyn, is it Hygienes?
Hutchins.
Thank you, I'm sorry. Do you agree that we need to advance so that we can ensure that the population mandate for family doctors is sufficient?
I know that there is an incredible shortage of doctors, and we are seeing that, especially within the disability community and the work that we do around having access to doctors. And when it comes to issues that could be chronic or episodic, and when you don't have...
Thank you very much.
Merci, c'est déjà ton.
Thank you. The time is up. Ms. Gladu, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I'm going to start off by just saying I come from a perspective of having been a chemical engineer for over 32 years in a very male-dominated world where there was zero opportunity to show any kind of weakness. So I'm really happy to hear the conversation that we're having today and see that we're making some progress. I'm going to start with Dr. Prévost. You mentioned 3 aspects to better inform, better support, and to better care. What kind of accommodations do you expect will be needed?
Dans les accommodations au niveau du travail, ça pourrait être...
In accommodations, it could be telework, it could be in terms of the temperature. There are different types of accommodations based on symptoms experienced that it could facilitate things for women.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Ms. Hutchins, we know that there are gaps and there's a variety of symptoms for menopause and there's gaps in service everywhere. But are there gaps that are worse for disabled and marginalized groups or ones that perhaps impact them more?
I think with perimenopause and menopause, often the symptoms can acerbate other symptoms and can go unnoticed and ignored. So I think there is a need for more flexibility in workplaces to allow for hybrid work options, to allow for rest and wellness supports, temperature control, inclusive leave policies, and sensory and environmental accommodations in the workforce.
Excellent, thank you. And to Ms. Bruno, this is a really tough question. You know, we've talked about all of the sleep deprivation, fatigue, chronic stress, brain fog, all the things that can happen. And you mentioned that we need to change perspective. How do we do that? Je vais pas vous mentir.
I won't lie, it won't be done by snapping our fingers. Of course, how do we say this quickly? Of course, we focus on what is scary, what doesn't go well, on weakness. But it's really about taking a step back and saying we need to feel legitimate to experience these changes. They're part of life. That already changes a lot in the way that people feel them, the way we're educated, the way we receive the knowledge will have an impact on the way we experience things. Unfortunately, there's a lot more information now on menstruation and menopause. So I talk a lot about menstruation, but we know that the way we learn about menstruation, if it's positive, then the experience is much less difficult than if you see blood in your underwear. It's the first time you hear about it. At 8 or 9 years of age, it's becoming earlier and earlier. Somebody could think they're going to die by seeing blood on their underwear. And so that affects the relationship to menstruation, and it's documented now. And so it's really a collective effort to sweep aside stereotypes about menopause. And we talk about a lack of research, but there is some, and there's some about the positive side of menopause. There's a certain type of liberation, emotional control, changing cognitive abilities. So at the basis, it's education, and it starts young in the perception of our experience as women in our bodies. What could we experience? It can be difficult, but it can also be a nice adventure. So I'm not here to minimize what is difficult, not at all. That can be the perception, but absolutely not. But to highlight that there's a diversity of experiences and we can really learn from each other about this.
Thank you. It looks to me like we've heard from many witnesses of the need for awareness and education. And I think the type of education that Dr. FEWO is providing to physicians that are learning under her, if we could leverage something like that, virtually would be great.
Madame
I'm sorry, Marilyn. I'll have to interrupt you.
Larouche.
Ms. Larouche, 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, thank you, Ms. Hunchens, for having joined us today. And thank you, Madame Prévost, Madame Bruno. As I said earlier, there's the health issue, and there are things we can take action on at the federal level, research and approving medication, but there's something that's not under our jurisdiction, and that's the healthcare system. But when we talk about a need for doctors, that's also about providing more resources to the healthcare system, and we would hope to see more transfers because we see everything that's being done. We need to provide more financial means to Quebec and the provinces on that. Now, to pick up on another aspect, there's the economic aspect. Madame Prévost, you provided 3 recommendations: better educating, better training, and more. And so the impact on the workplace, could you talk about that? And then Ms. Bruno, if you want to add something. We're talking about the workplace, but there's talk of menstrual leave. If we talk about menstrual leave, should there also be specific leave for those who have a more major experience of perimenopause and menopause? Would there be EI benefits to allow women to take care of themselves for a certain amount of time? How could we help them economically? Well, you said it. It's some women, so I wouldn't be in favor of something that's uniform, standardized. We shouldn't be stigmatizing. We need to really look at the consequences of symptoms and document them, just as with any other symptom that we could experience. Ms. Bruno, I saw you nodding. Yes, I echo Dr. Prévost. We have a concrete example with Spain and menstrual leave. I would say that our position is very nuanced to not stigmatize. That's the issue. So the idea is to have health care leave to be available, that it be part of leave, but to not stigmatize. We know there's, the media aspect of menstrual leave, but it's important to have some nuance on those issues. My time is up, but it's done, Madame Larouche. Sorry, Ms. Goodridge, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. Ms. Huntjens, I'm going to direct a bunch of my questions to you. I was wondering, what kind of traditional Indigenous knowledge exists around the space of menopause and perimenopause? Because oftentimes I feel like we have traditional knowledge that exists, and traditional plants, traditional medicines, and they aren't necessarily incorporated into Western medicine and beliefs. And oftentimes we can learn from that. I know I used and had the benefit of having an Indigenous midwife for my 2 boys, and got to learn some of those spaces of different herbs and stuff like that. And so I was just wondering, is there any space where we can learn on menopause and perimenopause that comes from that Indigenous lens of the traditional knowledge?
Yes, and I think it really, there's a focus on the emotional, spiritual, physical well-being of the individual, so taking a holistic approach and well-being, rather than looking at it just from a Western perspective of a medical condition and treating a medical condition. There's traditional medicines that support with symptoms and provide support, but it's also being able to have that spiritual, have that emotional and mental well-being looked at as well.
No, wonderful. And are you aware of any spaces where there is research into Indigenous women's health and incorporating traditional knowledge into the treatment of perimenopause or menopause in Canada or around the world?
I know that Australia has done a lot of work when they've looked at menopause and perimenopause and look at the Indigenous populations. Countries like the UK, Australia are quite farther ahead on some of the research into menopause and perimenopause, I think, and some of those frameworks could be really...
But specific to the traditional knowledge of Indigenous people?
I don't know that there's research being done. I know individual communities will look at some of their medicines to support perimenopause and menopause. The communities believe that a community works and includes everyone together, so they often have different views of disability, and when it comes to health impacts such as perimenopause and menopause, it'll be could be treated very differently in different communities across Canada based on the local medicines, based on how they support their communities. So there is not a one-size-fits-all where...
And I just want to, I wasn't implying that there would be a one-size-fits-all. We have a variety of different spaces. I'm very fortunate I get to be the Member of Parliament for Fort McMurray-Cold Lake, and so that covers both Treaty 6 and Treaty 8 territory, and there are changes and differences between different First Nations and how they approach some of these pieces, but I have been really touched to see the intergenerational sharing of information, the respect of elders, those kinds of conversations that perhaps don't necessarily happen in society as a whole. And I've been blessed personally to have Indigenous elders share with me some of their traditional ways of carrying babies when they're sick, or different spaces like that have really helped me in doing my job and being a mom. And so if there's an opportunity for you to share even just your community and some of what they do, that would be spectacular for this community.
I don't have any specifics when it comes to perimenopause and menopause on specific treatments that happen. I live outside of my First Nation, so I don't have that care. Often when people are leave communities, I had the unfortunate, through colonization, my grandparents left our community, so I don't have that connection with my community, but I do know from working with First Nations communities and the holistic approach that's taken, there is care given and the types of...
Merci beaucoup, chère madame.
Thank you very much. We have one person left, Ms. Nathan, for 5 minutes, and then a couple of minutes for decisions the committee needs to make. Ms. Nathan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I'll direct this question to Ms. Bruno. So I'm very conscious that not every woman has the same ability to navigate menopause. A professional with paid sick leave, workplace flexibility, and extended health benefit may have options that are simply unavailable to someone working shift work, multiple jobs, or precarious employment. There's a risk that many of the solutions we discuss benefit women who already have access to workplace supports while leaving behind those facing the greatest economic pressure. How do menopause experiences differ for women working in low-income, precarious, frontline, or shift work? And what policies would help ensure these women are not left behind? Ms. Bruno, if you could answer this.
Oui, en essayant de faire vite.
Yes, I'll try to be brief. So we need to listen to these women. We need to have discussions in their workplaces. That's what we'll always suggest when a workplace comes to talk to us because they're interested in this. Our first recommendation is organize a committee within your workplace and tell women that they will be listened to without judgment, and continue those meetings to hear from women and to put in place in the workplace something that reflects the workplace itself. It's difficult to have uniform standards, and so there are specific workplaces that put things in place individually as pilot projects, and they have ways to support women experiencing menstruation and menopause. So to summarize, listen to women.
Thank you for that answer. If you could create policies for this, like that's governing all of Canada, or if you could legislate, what would that look like?
Je ne m'attendais pas à cette question.
I wasn't expecting that question. I would say education first and foremost. Whatever we decide in specific laws, nothing can be done without solid education that concerns the entire public. For pilot projects for the distribution of menstrual products in schools and workplaces, we always say the same thing. You can put in place what you want, but if there isn't awareness among everyone on the reasons for these actions, to have women listen to, so that people who aren't concerned support it, it won't work. This is something that's so deeply rooted. We really need to help people speak on it. We need to take the time. We need to have evaluations for what's put in place. That's also very important. Not just putting something in place and saying it's done. It needs to be regularly assessed. It needs to be, and we need to ensure no one is forgotten. And it won't be done with a snap of the fingers.
Thank you. And to Dr. Provost, how does a broader social determinants of health shape women's menopause experience, and what policy area beyond healthcare should government be examining?
En fait, encore là,
In fact, once again, we must not stigmatize. We must avoid generalizations. I agree with Ms. Bruno. We need to raise awareness and educate. We really need to focus on that before trying to legislate or looking at policy. That's really what will change our approach. Our culture will be more sensitive to this. It's really that approach that I would suggest.
Thank you. And the last question to Ms. Hutchins. Several population studies have found significant gaps in data concerning marginalized population, making it very difficult to develop targeted policies.
Chers collègues, je suis désolée.
Dear colleagues, I'm sorry I'll have to interrupt you. The time goes so fast. There's a lot more we'd like to have heard. I apologize for interrupting so often, but we'd really like to receive in writing what you haven't been able to say today, any additional information you think would be helpful. I won't keep you long, but sometimes we receive confidential or anonymous briefs. For confidential briefs, they are not made public. Do you accept us accepting them? Okay, great. For anonymous briefs, we'll accept them if that's okay with you, but we won't publish them. I forgot to thank our witnesses. Thank you very much to our witnesses. You were fantastic. Thank you so much. We just have not very much time, but thank you very much. Now, regarding our calendar for the fall, we'll be wrapping up this week. So the first meeting in the fall, would you agree to having it be for committee business to determine what study we'll undertake after the menopause study? And then we could provide drafting instructions for the study on shelters, and then I'll conclude, and then I'll hear from you, Ms. Maynard. And then we could have our study on seniors. We have 2 meetings for that. And then we would continue with 2 meetings that we still need to hold on menopause. So first meeting, committee business, to determine what would be our next study. And then a report on seniors, and then menopause.
Madame Menard.
Ms. Maynard, thank you, Madam Chair. I should know, but I don't have the calendar in front of me. Have we concluded our meetings with witnesses on shelters? No. On Thursday, we're doing shelters. Okay, great. So in September, we will have concluded. Okay, great. Yes, that is why we would be providing drafting instructions at the first meeting. Is that what I had said? Yes, great. So we would determine what the next study would be, and we would work on our drafting instructions for our analyst friends. Okay, you were really extraordinary, as usual. Meeting adjourned.